Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 3. All right, let's review today's line. And it's bishop c5. It's our very first line covering bishop c5. We're going to meet that with knight g5. The other option is c3, which is a really good move, but I like this one even better. It's a lot more obscure, it's very tricky, and it's hardly covered by a lot of people, and there's a lot less branching, which means we're going to learn it a lot deeper past what most people know, and we're going to often gain an advantage because of that. So I choose this line. Their only good reply is knight h6. We then trade down here. That's all pretty much forced, and then we get this check here. So we spent 2 pieces to gain 1 piece and a pawn, and then we do this fork, which they then usually block, and then we get another piece. And so we gained a pawn there, and now the score is technically equal material-wise. But he can't castle, and he's got holes in his position, and we end up with a slight lead here unless they do d5 right here. Hardly anyone does that, except at the higher levels of play. You can see it's at 5%. So they usually go d6 47% of the time. So they hit d6. Now we have a nice lead that's like 20 points ahead, more like the Rui Lopez. So if they don't play d5 and they just play d6, we are now just as good as the top openings in chess. So we back off check, they block, and then we go queen e2. And this is our starting point in this opening. This is one starting point here. We'll reach this position most of the time when they go bishop c5, and then often they go d6, we back off, they check, we back off, and we end up in this position much of the time. So these 2 positions are key positions, that one there and that one there. So it's a very narrow line to here. So it looks like, hey, we've mapped this all the way to move 11, but not really. Anyway, it's a very narrow path. So the most common continuation is rook f8. We attack it with the bishop. They go rook e8, which is a good response. Rook f8 isn't actually bad when we attack it with our bishop. It's a decent move. So they go there to e8, and we go h4. This is the obscure line. There's 3,500 games that continue to this point, and then h4, there's 89. This is the top engine move. It's a very rare branch. Not a lot of people play this. Not a lot of people know it's there. We don't castle. We keep the rook behind that pawn, and we push that thing forward so we can bust things up. Makes it real nasty fast. This is another inaccuracy. Knight to e5 is a common move, and it's not the best one. We seize the dark squares, and they have nowhere good to go but d7 with their queen, and then we push h5 and start busting this open. And the most common response is a blunder. They put that bishop on g4. They think they're forking this pawn on h5 and our queen, but we just block it, and then they take that pawn, and then we trap their bishop. And yeah, we're going to lose some pawns here, but it's going to be worse for them. So the most common continuation is to take with their knight, like people often do when they're going to lose a piece. They'll try and get as much value out of it as they can, and they usually do it with the knight, not the bishop. So they trade that knight down, we take, they take, they take. And the thing is, right here, they need to take with their queen, or they'll drop another piece. But there's only one game. I mean, right here, we're down to like 3 games, and now we're down to 1 game, and it's a 1900 player against a 1700 player. And so we trap that. That's all the data we have. So, but these look like very common intuitive moves, and so it ends up trading down here. And if they take with the bishop, which is what we'll be looking at today, we take at h7, skewering their king to their queen, and not worrying about them attacking our queen, because we'll get their queen, they'll get our queen, and then we get their bishop too. And they get this center pawn check, and then we can easily just move to e3. They have 3 pawns, and it looks like they can create some nastiness for us, but we have 2 pieces to beat those 3 pawns with, and boom, we pin that rook. And now there's a forced rook trade, and it's going to be 1 rook against a rook and 2 pieces, and the extra 3 pawns will matter very little, and we'll just mop up. So there's the review. All right, so let's get into the line. Now, bishop c5 is the second most common. It's played about half as frequently as knight f6 at the top levels of play. At lower levels of play, it's almost exactly as frequent. So let's cover again why knight g5. c3 is a strong move, and for a long time I was playing it and I mapped it like crazy. Now I much prefer the knight g5 because of how obscure it is, because this is going to go very narrow here. I mean, things start getting really forced here. 99%, knight takes f7. 95%, king takes. 68% g6. 47% d6. A very, very common forcing line. and it goes very narrow. And a lot of people look at this and they go, oh, I've mapped it all the way to move 10. I'm good. I don't need to work on this anymore. I've mapped it really deep. That's not the way it works. That's the reason that we need to set Stockfish at looking at 200 million nodes and not a certain depth. Some lines are very narrow. This line was very narrow. And if they think they've got really good coverage by learning it that far, they're kidding themselves. We're going to take the same amount of effort and put the same amount of effort into this line as we would if we'd done the C3 version. And we're going to end up knowing it a lot deeper, a lot wider, and there's a lot of obscure lines people don't touch that are really powerful. So let's catch up my engine map to our position here, bishop c5, and let's add scores to this. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, bishop c5, right there. All right, so right here, the engine's like bishop c5 is 21 points in white's favor. And then as soon as we go forward, the c3 line, it continues that way. And so the bishop c5 is less popular than knight f6, partly because engines score. And we're going to respond by giving some of those points back. But it's an investment with interest. So they go bishop c5. We're not going to hit c3. Which is slightly stronger, but has tons more to learn. And personally, I think this knight g5 one is a bit nastier. All right. So if you take a look at the scores here on the side, you can see knight h6 is their only option. d5 and knight e5 people will occasionally do. 18% of the time, 13% of the time, we'll pick up some easy games, free wins, if we learn those lines really well and how to refute them, because they are blunders. And we will cover those. Some of them will take a fair amount of learning in order to learn how to really refute them hard. But we'll get there. Knight h6. All right. So knight f7, knight takes f7, or bishop takes f7. If you do the bishop takes, now they have to take with the knight. And now you think you take with the knight here, and you think that they now have to take with the king. No, they don't. They can check you. And the reason is because they're going to lose that bishop anyway in a minute. As soon as they take that knight back, you check them and then pop off that bishop. So they might try and get some value out of it. And so you have this small branch here that occasionally happens like 1% of the time. And how much, let's take a look at what the score of that is if they choose that branch. So if we take with the bishop, I don't have it mapped on this one. It's on my old one here, I'll add it. So it's a branch, and it's slightly better for you. But now you have a whole branch to learn for just a slight advantage. Let's look at the branch when we take with the knight first, that same branch. So instead of taking with the bishop check initially, we take with the knight, then they take back, and now we take with the hang on just a minute. We take with the knight first. They can immediately check. Let's look at that branch. So we take with the knight, and they immediately, hang on a minute. We take with the knight, and they can immediately go bishop b4 check. This one has a little bit of a better lead. Here, I'll expand that one for later. The branch here, if you take with the knight first, they do this bishop b4 check. You have a 36-point lead on this branch. So that if they do go down that branch, you've got a little bit of compensation for having to learn another line. You get 36 points out of the deal. But if you take and go this other way, and you take with the bishop check, and then they take with the knight, and then you take with your knight, and then they do the check, now you have a branch where you don't get a 36-point lead, you get a worse lead. A slight lead. And now you have another branch, and they're not penalized as much for it. And so I much prefer taking that edge case that rarely happens and play it optimally efficiently, which is to take with the knight, so that if they do the check right now, you end up with compensation for having to learn that branch. More compensation than you would by taking with the bishop first. All right, enough of that tangent. So after they take with the knight, now it's a check, and they can no longer do this check, and they have to respond to it immediately. And then it's another check, and now that bishop drops before it gets a chance to check us. So g6 is the most common reply, and then we take that bishop. So this is a starting point. That was a very narrow tunnel that we just blasted through, and it looks like we're all the way to move 9, but we've learned very little branching. So it's actually not, hang on a minute, let me catch this up over here. We haven't done a lot of coverage. In other words, the likelihood that our opponent winds up here with us without any mistakes is very high. So we've got to learn it past this point if we're going to learn this opening well. G6. Yeah, so right here when we checked them, they could go king G8 or king F8, and that, it looks like there's two branches there. It's really just one, because if they go king G8, we're going to go queen D5 check and force it back over to F8, and then take that with check. And so there's really only one stepping back move, king F8. Say king G8, queen D5 check, king F8, queen takes. All right, so there's two branches here, two lines. They go G6 or they step straight back. We're learning G6, so they go G6. I just wanted you to see the scores here. It's like 30 extra points if they just step back and you learn how to play that one correctly. But if they play optimally, they're playing G6, and then you're taking their bishop, and the game's equal here. If they play D5, and as we see, that in general games, for them to play D5 here is 5% of the time. Let's turn up the rating, and let's say we're playing against people that are 1800 and above. D5 is still 8% of the time. They're not seeing that move. Go all the way up to 2200 and 2500. All right, now we're starting to see 30%. Let's go all the way up to 2500. They should see it for sure by then, right? 46. 40% of the time, they're still playing D6. So even at the top levels on Lee chess, we're still, it's still to our advantage to learn how to handle the D6 line, which is the most common at lower levels of play. So anyway, they play D6. We're going to go queen C4 check. Let's see, D6, queen C4 check is our best line. I looked at some of the others. It's superior. They go bishop E6. Now, from here, there is a queen B5 option. It's not as nice, and queen E2 is the best way to go. And this is our new starting position. So this position we're going to run into in a lot of games, and you don't stop here. Many of your opponents are going to stop here because they look at the move number, move 11, and they think they've covered a lot of depth, but they've only covered move depth, not node depth, not branching depth. So they haven't run as much, like Stockfish does. They haven't run as much scientific experiments, as much data, and they haven't done as much experiments on this line as they have other lines, and they're not going to be able to play it very well from here if they don't work on it from here, which a lot of people don't. This is territory that's ripe for exploration. And take a look, 30,000 games have reached this position. From here, we have our first significant branch, 4 moves. And here's their scores over here. Rook E8, Rook F8, King G7, Queen F6, D5, again, D5. And yet, where is it? 1%. No one's playing D5. It's the second best move, Rook E8 and D5. And in fact, they're neck and neck. You can't really tell at this on move 11 at a depth of 200 million. You need to go deeper to really compare those two. So they're arguably neck and neck. And people aren't seeing D5 at all. Anyway, thought that was interesting. Rook E8 is the most common, or is the strongest. Rook F8 is the most common. Rook E8 is 18%. So we'll be covering the most common one, Rook F8, which is an inaccuracy. It's not as strong. And there's a number of responses we can do, and the Bishop H6 one leaves the most room for them messing it up, in my opinion, after looking down all the different lines. So attack it. And when you do, they've only got one good move, so that's great for our branching. And if they play anything else, we get a good lead. 88% of the time, they see that. Only 8% of the time, they fudge it by going to G8, and we can learn that branch later, but it's only 8%, so it's not worth it at this point. So they go Rook E8. Now, here's our very first massive branch. That was the most common continuation off one of the most common positions we're going to reach by doing this wing attack early on. And we're going to be playing H4. Take a look at this. 3,500 games, when they went Rook F8 and we went Bishop H6 in response, 3,500 games out of billions reached this point. Now we go H4, 89. 89 games play H4, and yet top engine move. And when you look in it, it's a lot juicier than the others. I haven't mapped these ones as much on this database, my older one. So I'm not going to be able to show you the alternatives as much this time and prove that these ones that I'm picking are really good. But I've done that in previous videos. It made the videos a lot longer. I hope you've got some confidence now and I don't have to waste as much time going down them. So I go H4. we haven't castled yet. Our rook is still behind that pawn. Normally, it's like castle and get our king safe, but look at his king out in the open here. And we've now seized some dark squares around it. His dark squared bishop, if you noticed, when we did that attack at the beginning, we traded a bishop and a knight for a knight, and then we forked and got the bishop back. But we took their dark squared bishop, and they took our light squared bishop. And so now they're weak on the dark squares. And when they pushed G6, they opened up their dark squares. And so when they go rook F8, they allow our bishop to go to H6, and we can then bring it out back to G5 and attacking their queen and gaining time and seizing the dark colored squares, and they can't dislodge it with H6 because they've moved the rook off of H8. At least not immediately. They'd have to waste time doing that. And so we end up getting a really nice stake of the dark squares right where their king is. And this is what I mean. The score is very, very close right here if they play the right moves, but one misstep and it's nasty because you're in on their territory. Meanwhile, your king, yeah, it's in the middle for the time being, but I mean, we could castle if we wanted. It would leave H4 unprotected at the moment, but we can bring our bishop back to G5 and protect it. We can then castle, and our king's safe, and it's very comfortable. Or we could go knight D2, and then we could castle queenside. We have options. Their king doesn't. And so this is a very fun... I like when they play bishop C5, the bishop C5 variation of the Scotch Gambit. Now that I'm doing the knight G5, I'm liking it more and more and more the more of this line I learn, as opposed to the C3 one, because there's just all these little corners that people haven't mapped. There's hardly any games that go down them. They're extremely tricky, and there's tons of opportunity to gain massive advantage. And we'll see that in this line. So anyway, we go H4, capitalizing on those dark squares. And if we look over here, the most common responses are these four. So unfortunately, there's a wide spread of four common moves we have to learn how to handle. They like to back their king off to where it's safe at G8. Sometimes they bring their queen to F6 to try and cover their exposed king. Sometimes they go to D7 to jump on those light squares, which they'll do. That'll transpose into what we're doing sometimes. So 95 is the most common, but it's only a quarter of the moves. But we're going to cover that one today. So they go 95. The line here against this one is to jump on those dark squares with bishop G5 and attack their queen. It's a lot more forcing, and it's going to be nasty because we're going to push H5, and no one's doing that. And we're already down to only 14 games of a sample here. Look at how tiny this corner is. They go 95. We go bishop G5. Queen D7 is done 100% of the time, 14 games out of 14. I think you could count on that move. There's nowhere else good for the queen to go. So that's pretty much forced. And then, white's often going knight D2. We're going to do H5. We're now immediately opening up their king side. And we're still leaving our king in the middle because it's not in any real danger at the moment. And so we don't need to commit to castling, and we can just hold that back. So we're nice and comfortable, and they're not. And that's fun. So they go queen D7, and then we push H5. Knight D2 is also a good move here, but H5 is just, I like it a lot better. And there's a lot more opportunities for them to make errors. And not as much branching, unless it's like where they've really massively messed up and we have tons of lead, and we like branches like that. Those are the reasons we actually want branching to happen, is when there's massive differences in the score, not close differences. We don't want 4 lines that are all equal. All right, so as soon as we do H5, here's where the blunder rate is high. Bishop C4 is the move they need to play, and it's pretty much the only move that doesn't start getting them into significant trouble. And if you look at the 6 games that reached this point, the average rating of these games, 1928, those ones are in the high 1700s, and then this one where they did Bishop C4, the correct move, 2100 and 2000. So the better players found bishop to c4, or I should say the higher rated players found bishop c4. And we probably will need to cover that at some point because people might play it against us, and that's their best move. At this point, they're forced into a game that's going downhill if they don't play bishop c4. But bishop c4 is extremely hairy and tricky. That score of plus 20 is just barely there if they don't mess it up, because as soon as they go bishop c4, you're going to take check on g6 and ignore the attack on your queen because check takes priority. If they take with the knight, now their bishop's unprotected and you win a piece. So they have to take with the pawn, and then you skewer their queen to their king. They're attacking your queen, so here, let's play this out real quick. So h5, this is their correct move. And you're going to be like, pop, and they can't take with the knight or you get the bishop. And then they take with the pawn, and then you're like, skewer, and then they got to move the king somewhere. And yeah, they're attacking your queen, but now you got theirs. And so you get their queen, and they get yours. And now your rook, they have to take yours because you just took theirs. And now your rook's under attack, and only their bishop is. But they don't have anywhere they can move their bishop and create any good threats. You have plenty of places you could move your rook and start creating threats. And you can start playing Pac-Man while they're trying to move their bishop to safety. And it ends up really, really nice. And if they don't play it absolutely perfectly, that 20 score that you see here that they've got if they go bishop c4 goes downhill and gets even worse. So that's the reason I like this h4 line that nobody plays. You know, take advantage of the fact that you're not castled yet. When they jump, when they, let's see here, right there. When they put that rook on f8, you pounce on that and attack it. They move it, you seize those dark squares. They bring their knight to the middle if they make that inaccuracy there. You start, you drive their queen away and force h5 down their throat. And if they play it right with bishop c4, it still gets really nasty with a quick exchange of the pawns and then a queen exchange. And yeah, but they often blunder here. Well, often, I mean, how many? I don't know if it's often. We don't have enough sample of this experiment to know, but that's the beauty of the knight g5 line in response to the bishop c5 Scotch Gambit, is we steer into waters that are hardly explored, and 15 games is just enough for us to start seeing what's likely. h5. All right, so what is the common move if they're not going bishop c4 like they really ought to? If they're not playing that, what are they playing? Well, they're seeing that when I go h5, they're like, aha, an error, pounce. And you're like, no, it's not. And you block. And then they get that pawn, and then you trap their bishop. And there's only one game that goes down this. And they're not like really high-level players either. They're 1,700 and 1,900. But I think just having that one sample shows us at least a little bit of data, not much, of what's intuitive for people. And maybe this, let's see, was this a blitz game? Yeah, it was a blitz game. Black ends up winning at the end only because white runs out of time. But white ends up getting the dominant position. But, you know, because these jumped out as their natural moves in a blitz game, these are the first moves that people are noticing even in a classical game. And so their likelihood of error is higher. And we already see that the bishop c4 version, which is their best move, leads to very dangerous waters. And everything else is just losing. So this is a beautiful line. This h4, you know, when they put that rook there, attack it, seize the dark squares, go after their, and they put the knight in the middle, go after their queen, push h5. A really nice continuation there. And if they blunder right here, forking those two, pounce on that too. Let them have that. Let them get, you know, 1, 2, 3 pawns for that piece, because you pick another one up here. And yeah, that's our next move. So they need to take with the queen here. And they don't. They take with the bishop. Let's take a look at this. So they go bishop g4. 190 points behind is what the engine says. And we have to play f3. So let's rewind just a little bit and keep the engine caught up with that. So when they fork here, we have to play f3, or we take 185 points and flush it down the drain and are left with just equality. So we go f3. Key moment. They take with the bishop at this point after we go f3, and that's actually their top move. Now that they've committed, they need to go through with it and not back off. And now, after they've taken that, our score is, we've got several potential moves, and I looked at all of them, and g4 is, in my opinion, the dominant one. For branching, trickiness, obscurity, well, we're already into the obscure level, so it's mainly branching and trickiness, and what was the other one? Engine strength. So, because it looks like it's only 174, but how many people are finding h6 here? Well, we only have one game sample, but you tell me. Let's look at this position. Once we trap their bishop here, how many people are going to go h6 there? It looks like a free pawn, another one, and the pawns is all that black's going to get as compensations and passed pawns, and he doesn't want to give that away. That is not an intuitive move to find. And if we take that, you know, why is that good? I think it's mapped on my other one. Yeah, it is. I don't remember. Was it the rook move? Yes, because that pins that bishop. And so if they find that, they can take you down a line where it's not as beautiful, but it's not likely. and there's only 2 branches. In the knight to d2 line, when I mapped that, there was a lot more branching that we had to learn. And this keeps the branching at only 2, with 1 being highly likely and 1 being very rare. And that makes our life a lot easier, because we can take the amount of effort we would have had to put in to learning all the branching in the knight to d2 one, and instead put it into, if they do find the h6, you know, we can hit them with that. And if they do the common move, knight takes g4, which we're guessing is common because we only have 1 game of data, but it probably is. It looks very intuitive to me. It's going to be a lot more forcing and a lot less to learn. And so I think it's the overall better way to spend our budget of how much everyone has finite time they can spend on learning these lines. This is, in my opinion, a much wiser way to spend our budget. So I do the g4. I give a little bit back. You know, they gave me a pound, they can have an ounce back, and reduce all the effort I have to learn down this line that could explode into a lot of learning. No thanks. So they take with the knight. And that's the short of it. They take, we take, and now they need to take with the queen. And they don't. Let's look at what the engine says about that. So the f pawn takes. They need to take with the queen. Look at that. If they take with the queen, you've got a score of 180. If they take with the bishop, you got a score of 400 something. You're winning another piece. If they take with the queen, you're going to take their queen. They're going to take with the bishop. And then it looks like, come on, it looks like you should take with that rook. No, you shouldn't, because then they attack your rook and they're going to get that e4 pawn and they're going to get some counterplay and you lose a good chunk of your score. You're pretty much better off, you're pretty much forced to do the knight d2 at this point and allowing them to have h5. And now they get these 2 protected passed pawns that look all scary, but you have an extra knight and it's not as scary as you think because you've got good support here and you get to castle. I mean, we forget that we can castle. I mean, all the pawns are gone. Their king didn't castle. Lots of things happened, but you can castle here with check. And if they bring their king to e6, you've got this nice fork. And if you do that and they back off, don't take g6, you'll throw away your whole advantage, seize the 7th rank, and check them again. And that's how you play it if they step to e6. When you castle and check, if they step to e6, fork and then go to f7. If they step to g7, then you pick up another pawn, that key pawn that's been bothering you over on d4, you fork and capture it. So their only good move here is to step back there, and that's the line you learn. And then you bring your rook up, preparing to double up. And at that point, people will play, here, I think I actually have this one. Queen takes, yes, queen. So queen takes, you can see the scores. There you go. Queen takes, bishop takes. So we're going on a tangent on this one. I usually don't cover tangents, but I just do the main lines. But this one's going to be an exception. And then we go the knight to d2. Then it lets them get that h5 in so they don't lose that h7 pawn with check and get skewered down that 7th rank. And then you castle with check. And then their king has to go g8. I just told you what you do if they go to e6 or g7. So they go to g8. And then you start getting ready with f2. And now they think, if I can trade off, this would be a good thing for me. And they'll challenge you on f8, I think, is going to be intuitive. We're guessing at this point. There's no games found. This looks intuitive. You've got that one rook. It's not backed up yet. And if they pounce on it now, but look, that loses another 50 points. They need to play a5 here. Who plays that? b6. Who plays that? Rook at 8 is c8? What's it doing there? There's a lot of counterintuitive moves here. Rook f8 is what's intuitive, and look, if you don't play bishop f6 here and block that, and you instead trade off or let him trade off, you will lose 100 points. Why f6? Because you're targeting that d4 pawn. You have 2 pieces. You have a bishop and a knight against his bishop. His compensation is he has 3 extra pawns, and you know, for people counting points, that's equal, but you know, you're a lot more than equal. You're 250 up, 58 up according to the engine because of your position. But if you don't play it right, you can easily lose points, like right here. If you don't do bishop f6 and block that attack on your rook and attack that pawn on d4, and he doesn't have a good response, you're going to win that pawn. And you might think, well, then he could do c5. But look how bad that is. Your lead goes from 250 to 316 if they do that. Why? Because knight c4. And you've now infiltrated their pawns, and you're now targeting the d6 one. So he's got 3 pawns as compensation, and you're going around gobbling them up if he doesn't play it right. So again, castling. He needs to take, again, after this trade-off where he gets 3 pawns, he needs to take with his queen, and this will be the line that you'll handle it with, and I'm just showing you a little preview of that, and that's what it'll look like right there. And that's where it ends. That's where it stops being intuitive in me being able to guess what they're probably going to do. So, but that's not the line we're learning. It's this little tangent here. We're learning where they take with the bishop. I just wanted you to be prepared for the queen one, because if you don't play it right, you can lose your whole advantage there. So they take with the bishop. We're going that way now. All right, whoops, that's the queen one. The bishop one's awful. You've got rook takes h7 check, and it gives you a lead of 401 points here. So they take with the bishop, you take there, h7 check. They go to g8, g8, you take their queen, they get your queen, you get their bishop. Hang on a minute, let me keep up here. Bishop takes, king takes. I'm sorry, they take e4 check. Sorry, you get their bishop, they take e4 check. And now you've got 3 good moves, but I recommend just jumping to d3. And now, unless he makes this blunder and you pop off that rook, other than that move, anything he does, just meet with rook to d8. You know, if he brings that rook over there, hit him with d8. And now you forced a rook trade, and he has 3 pawns. He's 3 pawns up, but you have a bishop and a 9 and a rook against 1 rook, and it should be an easy win at that point. And there you go. That's the line. And until next time, thank you.